I was a youngster, adult, but a youngster still. My friends and I were celebrating a birthday, and we were on our way to a party. But before we did, his girlfriend made us some brownies, which happened to have some marijuana in it. We're sitting in the sort of living room. There's a little coffee table in there. And on the coffee table, there's these ceramic figures. There's elephants, there's giraffes, lions, and tigers. I'd say I must have taken 3 bites of that brownie. But all of a sudden, those figures started moving. And, the lion literally, in my view, jumped across that little coffee table onto my lap. That was my first and last exposure to marijuana.
Hello and welcome to the Wellness Musketeers podcast, where we tackle complex health issues from multiple angles. I'm your host, Aussie Mike James, and today we're diving into a topic that's been lighting up conversations across the globe, marijuana use. In this episode, we're bringing you a comprehensive look at cannabis through the lenses of health, fitness, addiction, and economics. Our team of musketeers is ready to cut through the smoke and bring you clarity. Dr. Richard Kennedy will share his medical insights on marijuana's effects on the body and mind, including the potential therapeutic uses and health risks. Welcome, Dr. K.
Good to see you guys.
Okay. David Liss and I will be exploring how cannabis use intersects with fitness and overall wellness strategies. Welcome, Dave.
Hello. Hi.
And last but not least, our economist, Kettle Hviding, will break down the financial and societal impacts of marijuana legalization and commercialization. Welcome, Kettle.
Okay, you always get my name wrong. That's okay. You're Australian. You see things from the other side of the world, but that's
I know.
to be a part of this fantastic, clear-sighted panel.
Okay. On that note, whether you're curious about the medical applications of cannabis, concerned about its potential for abuse, or interested in its economic implications, this episode promises to deliver a well-rounded perspective on this complex plant. If you find value in our discussions, please take a moment to subscribe, share, and leave a review. It helps us reach more people. So let's spark up this discussion and explore the multifaceted world of marijuana use. And I thought today, panel, with the thought of full disclosure here, we might just reflect a little on each of our use or non-use of marijuana. We'll start with you, Dr. K. What's your experience with marijuana?
You would start with me. Well, way back when.
Before time.
When I was a youngster, adult, but a youngster still, my friends and I were celebrating a birthday, and we were on our way to a party. But before we did, his girlfriend made us some brownies, which happened to have some marijuana in it. And so I'm going to set the table. We're sitting in the sort of living room. There's a little coffee table in there. And on the coffee table, there's these ceramic figures. There's elephants, there's giraffes, lions, and tigers. And I'd say I must have taken 3 bites of that brownie. It was delicious, by the way. But all of a sudden, those figures started moving. And, the lion literally, in my view, jumped across that little coffee table onto my lap. That was my first and last exposure to marijuana.
So scary.
But I'm guessing you've treated people with marijuana who've used marijuana quite a bit, Dr. K, over the years. Yeah.
Over the years, yeah.
Yeah. What about you, Kettle?
Yeah, I mean, I don't have these fantastic stories, really, but I tried a little bit in my youth as well. Not very effective, but I remember we were stopped for drunk driving, but they failed the test for marijuana. As well back in Norway, so I think that was kind of interesting. And then since then, no illegal activity, but once it's become legal, of course, I will have to try it. So I've been trying a little edibles, and I tried sometimes a little bit too much, and you feel like you're amongst friends and you're there, but you're not there, and that can be quite uncomfortable. That's pretty much my experience. I used it a little bit to help sleep. It's a very low effect, low dosage, but not anything particular to write home about.
Okay, what about you, David?
Yeah, I mean, I've smoked occasionally over time, done edibles occasionally over time. One time I took something, just like Kettle said, thought, okay, I'll just take a little bit of an edible and I'll go to sleep. And I took it around 9, and the next morning I taught a boxing class at 6. And then midway through the boxing class, I realized I was still stoned. I didn't understand the difference between, a round and the break from the round. And I've had other experiences with edibles where I thought I'd left and gone to another planet, another country or something. It was a frightening disaster, but I repeated my mistake once or twice. But I think it should be available for people. But, you gotta, your conscience be your guide or something.
Okay. Well, listeners, now for something completely different. My experience with it is zero zilch. I've never had a smoke or an edible, and not because I'm just some great moralist, but I think because I was brought up in Australia in the 70s and 80s, we were very much a pub culture, and it just wasn't part of our lexicon or our way of life amongst the group I hang around with, and alcohol was very much a big mind-altering substance, so there was no need for marijuana, but we had the occasional people who used it, but I'd never experienced it. But I think the biggest thing that stopped me from using it on a deeper level was the smoking aspect, because my father passed away from smoking normal cigarettes, too many of them. He got emphysema. And my best friend's father, the same thing, another heavy smoker. And if you've seen emphysema, that's not a good thing to die from. And so that's always put me off from smoking, any aspect of smoking. So it's always held it back. But I've got an open mind. I've dealt with people who've used it, and athletes, people in the Parkinson's area and so forth. So I have an open mind about it, but I've just got zero experience using it. So that's our backgrounds in it, listeners. So on to the actual discussion. Just kick this off with our first little statement here. Is marijuana a miracle cure or a dangerous drug? What's your views on that, guys? Dr. K?
I don't think anything's a miracle cure. Marijuana falls into that general category. I don't, like anything else, anything in excess tends to be more of a problem than it tends to be a solution or benefit. So I don't particularly think that marijuana it has good points in the right circumstances for the right people, but it's not necessarily for everyone.
Okay.
Maybe I can, Dr. Kennedy, of course, is the expert, but I'm pretty concerned about what you see in the industry, and it's probably being pushed by the competition in the industry as well. They're putting forward quite often substantiated claims about the benefit of different marijuana products. And, and that's not regulated anyway. I mean, it's regulated in a way they are not allowed to do it. But then, if it is a competitive industry with a lot of actors, it's very easy. They put it out there and get clamped down, and then they put it back again. So that's a concern.
Yeah, that speaks to our second question, I guess, about the health benefits. And I can relate what you're talking about there, Kettle. I think the popular press sometimes makes it a blanket cure for everything with headlines. For a while, they did that with one particular Parkinson's patient whose tremors decreased markedly when he took marijuana. But the doctors and specialists, some of the best in the world that I've spoken with at various conferences, have said that may work for that person, but it's not a blanket cure by any means. So these blanket sort of statements that it's a cure for everything have got to be taken with a little bit of balance, I think. And what would be the benefits of taking marijuana, Dr. K? What are the purported benefits of it medically?
So medically, again, we need to go back to why would people from a medical standpoint want to take marijuana? And there are many reasons why people would consider it. And the basic issue is that the most common reason people initially medically take marijuana is for pain, to relieve pain, to relieve spasm. And so in the medical community, so for instance, as you mentioned earlier, Parkinson's patients or people who get multiple sclerosis and end up with spasticity, which means they have periods where they're really stiff and can't sort of move forward really well. What they found, and again, big issue is there aren't enough studies that have been done that where you can give a person marijuana who happens to have Parkinson's or happens to have arthritis or happens to have, or their ligament in their knee or something, because there aren't really good studies right now. They're doing more, and most of them are observational studies. You give a person it, and the dilemma is what works best? Does smoking marijuana give the benefit as well as a gummy or an edible would? The only true studies where they really studied it clearly so far to my knowledge has been for cancer chemotherapy. The results of chemotherapy, one of the main side effects is nausea and vomiting. And what they found was when they gave people marijuana and pretty much all the formulations, smoking, edibles, even tinctures that you can rub on the skin or oils, the reduction in nausea and vomiting was real to those patients. But like anything else, the longer they used it, the less the benefit. Now, they've done some comparable studies where they've taken marijuana and given it to a group of patients who have nausea and vomiting after chemotherapy. And then they've given it, and then they've taken the prescription drugs to give them and compared the two to see which one got the most benefit or relief of those symptoms. Hard to say, partly because it wasn't a standardized way that they got it, because they used people who went to their own medicinal clinic and got their type of marijuana. And one medicinal clinic is not the same as the next. Mm-hmm. The percentage of the different cannabis and THC, cannabidiol, diol, can never pronounce it. That's why we call it THC, is the one that has the more euphoric, high sensation, relaxing sensation, whereas the CBD or cannabinoid are the ones that can have a benefit in reducing things like anxiety. So they have found that people who take it to relieve depression, it has found benefit, anxiety.
What about sleep? Oh, sorry.
Sleep as well. But what the belief is that, first of all, when it's people who are using it for the very first time, who aren't frequent users, they tend to get much of those benefits initially. But like anything else, if you keep using it, sometimes the beneficial effect wears off. And in some, you actually get more of the effect that you were trying to prevent. Therefore, people sleep now instead of it being relaxing. Because if you think of what happens when people get the marijuana, the THC portion of it, it makes them feel relaxed. It makes them feel calm. It makes them feel comfortable. So initially that makes sense that the person next will be able to sleep better. But it doesn't, they haven't done studies to compare, well, how is it in the most important part of sleep, which is REM sleep? We don't really know. At least I've not seen anything. So continuing to do studies to try and.
Do you think it
must be very difficult. Sorry?
Do you think it's a good idea that all these states are legalizing marijuana for medicinal purposes?
I think the dilemma is that you have states that are legalizing it, but according to the federal government, it's still illegal. And that now they're creating laws to do that, but at the same time, we don't have enough information right now to say that it's, the only thing that it's been proven really well is nausea and vomiting from cancer chemotherapy.
It must be very difficult. As you know, the gold standard for medical testing is the double-blind random test. So, as long as you feel the THC, then you know that you got it. If you have very small dosage, maybe then you can kind of have a placebo, and they don't know whether they get the placebo or not. And then you can actually do it. So maybe they've done that for cancer patients, because, you need that in order to get it FDA approved.
There are, and the other thing that there are 2 pediatric seizure disorders that happen only in the pediatric population, where they found that marijuana, but specifically 2 types of drugs that they have approved, and I cannot remember the name of them right now, but those 2 marijuana type drugs have been beneficial in preventing seizures in those children. But it hasn't been effective in people who have other seizures, like most adults who have seizures. But in that pediatric age group, yes.
Okay. Dr. K, when you talk about the calming effect, I guess anecdotally from what I've seen, people who have rather aggressive or sometimes violent dispositions, I've seen good effects on those sort of people because it sort of brings them down a little. In popular culture, we've got Mike Tyson, I think.
Yeah.
Who sells marijuana now, I believe. But I think that's had a good effect on him, from afar at least. And people I've known who've had that sort of hyper-stroke violent disposition, that certainly helped them calm down. Is it something they would use in a psychological settings? A psychiatrist, would they prescribe that, or is that still an unknown?
I'm sure there are people who would be willing to try it if they have failed at everything else. And again, this goes back to how marijuana, particularly the THC portion of it, works in the brain. There are receptors in the brain for cannabinoids. And so what happens is, and the good example is the person like you sort of described who's hyper anxious. And those people, if you give them marijuana, why their anxiety goes down, why they calm themselves down, is because it affects the release of dopamine into the system, which then makes people calm down. Same token for people where who are depressed, who they give marijuana to, because the other side of marijuana is that it makes you feel good. It makes you feel this release of, I'm cool, I'm feeling relaxed and everything else. It puts people in a good mood. Same thing with the release of and the effects of serotonin and dopamine in the brain. So from that perspective, it does that.
But
the dilemma is that one medicinal marijuana site versus another, the dosaging and everything may be very different.
Okay.
Is it like you were saying before, though, where the effects diminish over time, the perceived benefits?
Well, that's one of the things that they found, is that the longer you use it, what they found is people's memory decreases. The ability to concentrate into focus decreases. So indirectly, how does that affect an adult down the road? One day they're this level of IQ, and they've said that people's IQs who chronically use marijuana will decrease. Now, I've had friends who told me, I'm definitely not as smart as I was, but I can't stop taking the marijuana.
Really? Wow.
And so I always say, well, why don't you stop it for a while and see if you get smart again?
It's like when I took it and I had a discussion and I couldn't really remember what the other person had said.
Mm-hmm.
That's not long-term use, but it shows a little bit of the lack of concentration that you can get. And it was actually quite powerful. I thought, like having Alzheimer's.
But it's funny because when you're with a group of people, everyone's stoned, you kind of feel like you're being really profound and thoughtful when you're talking with other people.
The stoner, I haven't had that, but I've seen people in that environment. They look completely silly.
Like I have a friend, and her sister smokes every single day, and her family says that she's an easier person to be around. It helps with her anxiety, with depression, and I just wonder. And she also smokes cigarettes. And I'm thinking, is that
what it points out, and sort of what we've been saying, is that it affects different people differently. Mm-hmm. And so there are people who can, my first experience with it was not a good one. And so because of that experience, anytime the thought of doing it, I remember that experience because it was so vivid and real to me that I wouldn't want to do it. Well, the same thing for the person who on the other side realize if I take this every day, I'm calmer. I'm not so these are the people who have attention deficit disorder or hyper anxiety disorder. They'll take it and they'll tell you they're much calmer. And people who are around them, who know them, will say that they're different.
Yeah.
They'll think that they're taking a prescription drug, but they may only be taking marijuana. Because, it's like anything else. Most of us don't go around telling all our friends every drug we take. Not part of the normal conversation to sort of do that. Now, when it's appropriate, you share that information, but on a normal basis. Well, it's different if you're smoking because you can smell it a mile away when it's there. It's easy to know that it's in you somewhere. You may not see the person smoking, but it's in you.
You walk down the street in New York and you get it,
In D.C.
Oh, yeah.
In D.C.
High, as we used to call
it. You get eye just walking down.
But to be the devil's advocate here, Dr. K, when you talk about chronic use, I mean, if you're a chronic person, chronic alcohol use, you should get the same things though, right? Your memory goes, your speech deteriorates, your performance deteriorates and so forth. So I guess it's a matter of anything done to excess has some consequences that aren't too good.
Without question.
Yeah. But the analogy I've always used, and again, I'm not a smoker, but I've always said if you get a group of young bucks or young aggressive guys around drinking alcohol, there's going to be something happens later on. I mean, there could be trouble.
Yeah.
But a group of people smoking marijuana, that won't be an issue. I mean, is that too simplistic a sort of
Again, this goes into who are these people basically before all of this happened?
Yeah.
Controlling for the type of people we're talking about.
Yeah.
I see the boxers, that whatever they take, they're going to get into trouble. And those are slim nerds.
Yeah. And that's what happened. And I think that if nothing more we get out of this is that it is important to recognize that the marijuana that's out there is not uniform.
Right.
So the marijuana that's being sold in DC is going to be different than the marijuana in Virginia or the marijuana in Massachusetts or in New York, or wherever. And because it affects people differently. Now, what we are creatures of habits, so that if we go to the same store all the time to get the same thing and we get the same benefit from it, we tend to revisit it. Well, it's no different than marijuana. Go there and you're in this terrible pain. You got this terrible back pain that the opioids, and that's one of the things that they have found, that in people who have their pain so bad that they're on opioids, when they start taking marijuana, their use of opioids goes down. And technically the view that opioids are a much more dangerous drug long-term for use. So indirectly, there's a benefit from it. You get the person off of it.
Can you talk a little bit about the different kinds of marijuana and the difference between smoking marijuana on the body and eating marijuana on the body, like sativa, indica, on the couch, or hybrids, that kind of thing?
So the smoking is the one that many people back in the 60s and the 70s was the thing that most people were doing. Now it's a combination of, because it's legal in 39 states now and the District of Columbia, that you can now, they're selling it as edibles in different forms, as gummies. I've even seen things where they're giving it funny names to attract. I always say this is a negative part of it, to attract things like calling it Pop Tarts. And it's a takeoff on Pop Tarts.
Yeah. Sure.
Which who are they indirectly trying to sell us to? And for one thing, but smoking is the quickest way because you inhale it and it gets into the bloodstream immediately, and it goes to every organ in the body, including the brain. So, and this is how they've come up with different ways of giving people treatment for it. They found that people, when they were taking the gummies or the brownies or however they're taking it by mouth, for those people who have a condition we call irritable bowel syndrome, where people have periods where they have a lot of loose bowel movements and crampy abdominal pain, or there's a form of it where you have crampy abdominal pain and constipation, or there's 4 forms of that. And what they found that some people who take it that way get relief of their symptoms. But again, because it hasn't been standardized how they've tested it, you don't know if it's really that marijuana that they took earlier in the day, or is it that they just changed what they ate, or that their stress level is less. We just don't know. When you smoke it and inhale it, they see that it has a benefit where it gives people, and as Kettle said earlier, once you inhale it, because it goes directly, it's like alcohol. It's why when you go to a bar, they always put a little tiny, tiny straw in the drink. And what does that do is if you sip it through there rather than just drink it, you actually are taking in oxygen, goes straight to the brain. So
Was that why they had the straw? I just ignore the straw. I
So the straw
didn't know. That's for girls, I thought.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That quick way to get people, because a lot of people that go to bars don't really drink a lot. So you do that and they're sort of nip and stuff. You get it. Go straight to the head.
So is that why? So if you want to save money, put a straw in your drink at a bar. I read that when you eat it, your body metabolizes pot in a way that it's more intense effect on the body by eating it as opposed to smoking it. I don't know if that's because every place you get it, it's different. It's not like you buy a box of cookies.
I guess indirectly the difference is that when you eat it and it's broken down and put into the circulation, it goes to every organ in the body equally. It just gets distributed equally. Versus inhaling it, it's first coming up here to the head. It's first coming up here to the head, to the lungs, and then goes everywhere else. Different.
I have a question related to what Mike said, fear of cancer, I guess, the same effect as tobacco. But I do think that smoking marijuana is less linked to kind of
emphysema.
That's fine.
I don't know.
Yeah, what you have is you may have people who have they're more at risk for having a condition we call bronchitis, which is inflammation of the upper lining of the lung.
From marijuana.
So therefore, you may be someone who now is developing a chronic cough. Because we used to there are a lot of people who smoke cigarettes who cough all the time, but there are a lot of people who smoke cigarettes who don't cough.
So is
the belief is there's more inflammation with inhaling marijuana in the lungs itself, but there's been no close association with cancer of the lung.
Okay, so
I mean, but you're not saying it's safe to smoke. You're saying they haven't directly linked smoking marijuana with increased risk of cancer.
Yeah, that's all. That's
no science for it.
Part of it still is there aren't a lot of studies out there literally testing that theory. Because again, as Kettle said earlier, you need to have a sort of placebo-controlled environment where you have one group who's actually getting the marijuana. Now, anybody who's smoked marijuana and has smelled it, you kind of, even if you're not the one smoking it, you know that person's smoking it. So if you gave the placebo group what was essentially tobacco and had them inhale it, and they don't get that same aroma and smell, and they don't get that same sort of nice, euphoric, calm, relaxing sensation, they already know, oh, wow, I'm in a placebo group. I'm not getting anything. So there are difficulties in even wanting to test that from that perspective. Now the other way you could do it is you could take two groups of people who smoke marijuana and basically do serial chest x-rays, make them cough up sputum, stuff like that. You might get something out of that, but it's not realistic. And again, eventually the placebo group's going to know they're not getting anything. And particularly if there's someone they really enlisted in this because they wanted to get free rent marijuana. And after 2 weeks, smoking two joints a day and stuff, and I don't feel anything. I don't feel anything. I'm up all night.
Like low alcohol beer.
Yeah.
Dr. K, with the medical, what about for pregnancy and breastfeeding and the effect on fetal and infant development? We know normal smoking has big effects on that. What about marijuana?
Well, it's probably the same thing. Again, the simple thing about pregnancy is that, and the recommendations have always been the same. Don't give them anything during pregnancy because particularly the first 4 months of the pregnancy, when the baby is developing all of its organs, tissues, and everything. If you do it then, now, in theory, yeah, you would expect that it might be an issue. Now that brings up the point, what happens and why they are against having young kids using marijuana. Because they have definitely found that there's impaired attention, difficulty to focus, memory and learning problems, difficulty thinking things through, poor IQs. So they clearly have shown that in people who were smoking marijuana before they were 18 years old, they tended not to be as academically smart as those who didn't.
Does it affect people differently throughout their life, like a teenager versus a 40-year-old versus an 80-year-old?
It depends on the reasons why. So I always say, we have to remember that under normal circumstances, most people aren't doing marijuana every day, like a person does a cigarette, or even a person has a drink. In many ways, it was started out as it was part of a social thing to, get to hang out with your buddies, your girls, and have a good time and then relax and enjoy. So it's difficult I wouldn't think that there's, for whatever reason, older adults, when they start using it, for the most part, they're using it because they have a specific need that they want to address. Pain is one. Nausea and vomiting is another. Sleep has become another. Now, as mentioned earlier, people who start smoking marijuana, using gummies and edibles, etc., there have been reports that they sleep better. They sleep better, that they notice if I take my gummy at 7 p.m., I sleep better that night. But if I take my gummy at 12 noon, I don't necessarily sleep any better at night because I'm probably napping in the middle of the day. So, and this is very much individualized.
Okay.
Everybody, and again, if there's no, at least to my knowledge, there's no standardization of marijuana because the percentage of the THC in each plant is different.
So, Dr. K, with those medical implications, what about marijuana's interaction with other medications? What should patients and healthcare providers be aware of? Is there anything you shouldn't mix it with? Your Advils and so forth? I don't know. Blood pressure medication.
I take the same principle. I'd say that's always, you have to have that discussion with your provider. Anytime you're going to try a new drug, and many times it almost always say, so for instance, you almost don't want to mix marijuana with opioids because it tends to, because they both have the potential for becoming addicting drugs. Same principle, you probably don't want to mix marijuana with alcohol.
Double whammy.
Yeah. So same principle. I would say that it's important that you should try not to mix any drugs that you haven't had a discussion with someone who's more in line to give you some answers.
Remember in high school health class, they talked about the potentiating effect. It was alcohol. That one drug intensifies the effect of another. Is that a good understanding?
Again, yeah, depending on the drug, depending on what its mode of action is, yes. But everything's different. It's all very much up in the air.
I heard some people say that you can't get addicted to marijuana, and I don't know about that.
Done with that one.
Anybody's entitled to say anything.
That sounds a little bit strange.
Yes.
I would always say I could, it's no different than the person saying you can't get addicted to sugar.
Sure, definitely. Maybe there's no withdrawal effects in the same way as there are with certain other drugs, or at least not strong withdrawal effects.
I would say for the person who uses it, you'd almost have to be using it like the person who smokes cigarettes, that you're smoking every day. You're using marijuana every day. You're using it 3 or 4 times during the day, and then you cut it off. Because remember, once the chemical gets in the body, it goes to different cells within our body and has an action effect. It's either going to enhance in the brain, it enhances the release of certain chemicals, which in some people is a good thing. It calms them down. Or in others, it elevates their mood, makes them happy, etc. Same principle. So one would think that if you've been doing something regularly for an extended period of time and you take it away, it's no different. Same thing would happen with alcohol.
No, there's a strong withdrawal effect in tobacco, but maybe here too. I mean, but you could probably measure that. I'm very skeptical, although I don't know what the studies are, for taking it as a sleep aid on a regular basis, as I am with any other medication, and in particular because I don't know what the studies are, but the REM sleep is for me important, and that is, and I felt that when I've done it in the morning, I'm a little, but that may be just imagination.
Well, I agree with you about the REM sleep because that's the most important one. And again, there have been studies where they've said where people have gotten the benefit of better sleep with the use of marijuana. What we're not sure about is what kind of marijuana are they having? What's the dose of the marijuana? Are they taking it to get them back to getting, because once you can get into REM sleep, you can have a good sleep. So if it takes 3 or 4 days of this person using the marijuana to get good sleep, they may be able to stop and go right into REM sleep.
Maybe.
But we don't know. And again, this still points out they still have to do a lot of studies. I know Harvard is doing, it's the organization at Harvard is called MIND, MIND, and they are doing studies. They're doing a lot of studies to determine those effects, to see what benefits there are, etc.
It's quite common to take for sleep now.
Say it again?
Quite common for especially older people to take it as a sleep aid.
Well, I would tell you, for older people who've never done it, it is hard to get them to consider doing something like that. Because part of it is for the longest time, our view of marijuana publicly has, no, you shouldn't do that. No, you shouldn't do that. And now that it's become legal, because they say most of the people who go to the medicinal plant places are in their 30s.
Okay. So the boomers are not...
No, the boomers were, no.
I do know, like...
they've been there.
Drink more.
Like
boomers drink a lot.
I have a friend who works in a retirement community, and they have increasing things with, marijuana usage for the residents, and
that's a retirement community for old hippies, Dave. That's why.
Yeah.
Now they can do it legal.
Special,
yeah.
You are Dave's friend, I guess.
It was the Jimmy Buffett retirement community, but that's different.
But Rich, the old bugbear, the old pejorative term that people who really didn't want you to take anything They always said it was like they used that term gateway drug.
Yeah. That was
the popular term.
Yeah.
So is there any proof of that? I'm a beer drinker. It doesn't mean I'm going to be drinking scotch and lead me on to. That's the way I view it.
Well, the simple answer is I don't think it's any more a gateway drug than anything else is.
Yeah.
And again, but this always goes back to personal. There are, because I think we all have the ability to become dependent on something if we use it enough.
Yeah.
And if when using it, it gives us a certain, to constantly use the same thing again, you get something from it. You get some reward. When that reward is no longer as intense, this is nothing like heroin was. This is nothing like speed was, cocaine, none of those things like that, where you get this immediate sort of sensation. And when it's gone, you want more of it. It doesn't appear to be that that's the case, but I always say that you're always going to find an individual or individuals who use it and no longer get the benefit and advance to something else because they're looking for
a bigger high. Yeah. But here's another one that wasn't on our rundown. Actually, I'll throw this out to all the dads in our group. What about if you have a youngster growing up who starts experiencing marijuana and things like that? What's your advice on approaching something like that? If you're a concerned parent or uncle or auntie or whatever.
Firm and delicate.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, in my family, and not only because of me, but it was like, I never tried it, which is not true. No, but I mean, so I think in a way, especially with the legal drug, you will have this sort of discussion that we have now about they probably already tried it when you have a discussion.
Yeah.
And then you need to kind of figure out a little bit in what context and what actually was the effect. And, there's always, as with, illegal drug is pretty straightforward. It's like you don't know what you get. You can get something really dangerous there. I think there's the biggest danger, although there are other as well. But now with legal, it's a little bit the same. You go to one of those gift shops in DC, they can put a lot of things in there.
Right.
And again, they're using it maybe for some special benefit, but I think in reality is that you have to kind of push for the fact that you need to affront the world as much with kind of clear eyes as possible, as being sober.
Yeah.
Once in a while, they try something else that, it's not different from what we've done, but it's important not to kind of lock yourself out from the reality.
Right. Yeah.
So you need to have a discussion about it, like with sex.
Yeah.
It's not easy,
And
sex is probably more difficult.
They're difficult discussions. I remember having the discussions, but it wasn't me that initiated it.
Interesting.
So my kids asked me, "How old were you when you tried this?" And I said, "Why would you assume that I tried it?" Because I know all my friends, all your friends who are my uncles. I know them.
Right.
So did you give him the answer then, the effect that it had on you?
Yeah.
Yeah. It sounds quite impressive, actually. You got some good stuff there.
Yeah.
You don't hate the stuff anymore.
Avoid the dancing lions and elephants.
It was really, listen, to the point that we can't have any ceramic anything on our coffee table.
Really?
Really? No.
On the next podcast, I'm going to come up with some ceramic, and I'm going to.
Look, we've covered a lot of the physical aspects and so forth. Anything we missed there, guys? Dave, do you have anything else to throw out there? Because I thought we'd move on to the economic and business considerations.
No, I
Are we
think
good to move on? I think we've covered a lot of areas.
Yeah.
So, all right, this might be right in your area a lot more, Kettle. How has marijuana legislation impacted state economies, and what are the potential long-term economic benefits and costs, etc.?
I mean, there's shown to be some increase in income in those states, in particular the newcomers. So they had a lot of tourism, marijuana tourism. But it's actually the impacts on the economy are not that really large. I mean, it's a very competitive industry, as you know. Some effects on taxation. Of course, you get increased taxation. And actually, it's quite interesting. You also have federal taxation.
How does that work?
I was so surprised when I saw that, and I actually talk about it being taxed more than other businesses. But again, these are probably things to kind of sort out. On kind of, so taxation is quite. So taxation goes up on marijuana but goes down on alcohol, because there's some reduction in alcohol consumption when you have it's been freed in different states. That also impacts, it seems, driving under influence violations and traffic accidents. Actually, a traffic accident seems to have gone down significantly, but not a lot. The big question and big debate actually in some states has been the effect on homelessness. And where it seems like, there was a reported number of 35% increase in homelessness, but the data are not significant, as economists will say it. So there is the question of significance, but then of course there's the question about all these kind of studies. There are event studies. So they say you have a treatment, they call it treatment actually, affecting when actually you have a deregulation or the legalization, and then you see what's happening afterwards. But a lot of things are happening afterwards that you don't control for, you're not able to control. So I would say homelessness is, I would guess it's a spurious or not really a real thing, but it definitely is something being talked about, because you have, typical popular examples of San Francisco, homelessness in San Francisco, even in Colorado, some kind of, and it might also be, that might be linked to the fact that the places that you have the most earliest liberalization are also quite liberal versus homelessness.
Okay.
Was there not anything about rates of drunk driving decreasing or anything like that?
Rates, I mean, I don't have numbers in my head, but there is a reduction in drunk driving, but there is, of course, driving under any influence on marijuana is also dangerous.
Yeah.
It's not so easy to pick. You need the blood test. You cannot just breathalyze marijuana drinker, I think, in influence, especially if they've taken a edible. But as you were, when you were taking, you had the impact, and you don't know what's going on, you're going to be off the road as well. I mean, with marijuana or with alcohol. But overall, it seems like it's reduced somewhat the basically driving under influence, whatever it is that has impacted, that basically reduced traffic accidents. So, but it's small effect.
Okay. So, Kettle, you said it's an opening in the burgeoning area. What are the key challenges and opportunities for entrepreneurs looking to enter the cannabis industry?
Well, it's very competitive. The margins are small. It's not, but it's also a competitive industry in a way it is possible to enter. It doesn't take too much to set up a shop. But then you will have to look your back for the kind of cannabis products that are out there, because there's a lot of innovation and a lot of different things that comes out. But it's in a you can enter the market. Still, it's not monopolized. When the big tech company starts entering, or maybe Trump enters the market, then it might not be possible anymore. But we're not there yet.
Okay. So what are the economic implications of the current federal-state legal discrepancy surrounding marijuana, particularly for banking and interstate commerce?
Yeah, of course, the banks have problems legally. So basically, the operators cannot have bank accounts in the same way. I mean, check accounts in the same way. They might have a bank account, but they are really severely limited using our banks. And that's why you have a lot of cash going on, and that increases the danger. Of course, as you know, you see these places, they have guards outside because they have a lot of cash in there in the shops.
Yeah,
First place time as well. So having a legalization on a federal basis would make a lot of sense in terms of reducing these sort of crime tendencies, make it market more transparent, make it easier to operate. And maybe even it would be easier to scale up as well. If you can have a good banking relationship, it's easier to scale up the business.
first place I ever went in DC.
Sorry?
The first place I ever went to in DC to buy pot, I was anxious about going. It just been legal that recently. And I went up the escalator and there were two policemen. I thought, oh God, I'm going to go walk up the stairs to get it. But they were there to help you find this place where you're going to buy the dope.
When I have the few times I've done it, but I've gone in and you will have a rather strong looking guy, maybe two, looking at you in a rather kind of suspicious way. Yes, I mean, if there's not police security, there's always security.
And I mean, the strange thing, it's the only kind of place you can physically go to as a store where you can't use plastic. You can only pay cash, and
why is that?
Why? No, it's because it's federally, it's a federal crime, and they cannot have bank.
Because I know I was a coffee place that opened near me, and I went in there and I left my card in the car, but I had cash, and they wouldn't accept cash. They only took plastic.
What was that? Where?
Place in Virginia.
So it's the opposite. They only took plastic.
Yeah, and I think that, like with marijuana, you can't use plastic, and like this.
No, exactly. And it's because for a bank whose federal charter, it's a crime.
Yeah, okay.
To facilitate the purchase of marijuana.
Well, this friend when I was talking about this place.
What?
My friend's sister was talking about a place where she went and she had so much cash. If you want cash, then you have to pay the surcharge on I don't know if that's related to the pot store or the bank that they're using or both. But yeah, it's the same place was robbed that I had gone to. They had to move.
Yeah, sure.
Because all it was cash.
More than anything, I mean, it is also from state to state and from district to I'm in DC. It's not a very transparent market. What is actually going on changes from month to month. Now it's changing. They're changing somewhat the legislation here. They're trying to clamp down on those gift shops. So basically the gift shop is a place where you buy basically an artwork that's valueless, but you pay 20 or 30 bucks for that. And you get like some gummies in exchange. So moving more towards dispensaries, because the dispensary have been complaining that those gift shops have been taking over the market.
Taking their money.
The dispensaries, and you can get the medical marijuana easily by just filling in the form and saying that you need it for medical reasons. So it's pretty much recreational in effect. So that's the DC, but like 2 months, the whole situation might be changing. So it's not, and again, traveling with this stuff I know people have been doing it, and I know people who've done it, but they could be stopped at the airport and they could be handcuffed.
Really? Well,
they're not. I mean, the reality is that it's tolerated in the US in most places, and TSA is tolerating it. But go abroad and then you
could be in big trouble.
Really more careful. And there was this athlete that got imprisoned in Russia.
Oh, yeah, Brittany Griner.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, we've covered a lot of areas there, guys. I mean, if there's one, maybe if each of us had one point we could bring up or to summarize the discussion, my view of all you've said to this is I'm not going to try it anytime soon. I'm sticking to what I've got. Alcohol's enough for me, but I do see, I've learnt about the different strengths, which I didn't know about, and I'm not going to steal Dr. Kennedy's thunder, but I would say anyone who's contemplating starting it would be, especially if they're about my age in the 60s, would want to talk to their doctor first to get and work out where their lifestyle is in terms of medication and so forth. Dr. K, do you have any final words?
I tend to agree with you, but I'd say you have to decide why you want to do it. It's not one of those things that, like it's like the person who is going to drink alcohol for the first time. Sometimes you do it just because you're just fitting in with the crowd, the event, etc. But then afterwards, when you have the opportunity to do it and it's legal, you ask yourself, why do I want to do this? Now, I can understand the person who has significant pain using it, at least attempting to use it if other things have not worked. And like so many other things in life, what you hear a lot of times you hear from other people who've had similar concerns about whatever it is, if it's based for a medicinal purpose.
Right.
Recreationally again is, if it's going to be a very occasional kind of thing, that's one thing. But if it's now going to become part of it, that every day I need to take a lunch break and go out and take 2 puffs, then you kind of have to ask yourself, what's the reason why you really need to do that now when you never used to do it before? Because then we start talking about other concerns. And, so I think that it's, there's so much up in the air about it. It would be nice if somewhere down the line they eventually standardize it so that we know, first of all, what you're getting. And if they use milligrams, if they use percentage, however they do it, there needs to be some consistency, because otherwise then you're a prisoner to dispensary you go into. And they may, not to say that anybody's trying to do anything nefarious. It's just the reality is we have lots of products out there in the open market that we can walk into a drugstore, supermarket and purchase. And we have the expectation that it's got what they say is in it.
Right.
That is not necessarily always the case with marijuana, particularly. Not that it's not marijuana in it. There may be marijuana, but it may be much more than you might.
Much more potency.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, that's a very big point. I would never have known that, neophyte that I am. But Kettle, do you have anything else to add?
I would really focus on that, and because this is a very unregulated market, I think we need much tighter regulation of it, a standardization. We also need to get more research on the effects.
Yes.
Because this is, and I'm also a little worried that in certain states, there's a marijuana lobby now.
Yes.
And they are pushing for let them do whatever they want. And again, it might not be that they are trying to kind of do us harm, but they indirectly do us harm by trying to make profit. And that's an old story, as you know.
Yes.
Right. Dave, do you have anything else to add?
Well, I think what Dr. Kennedy and Kettle said and you are well said. I'll leave it there. I think.
Okay. No problem. Okay. So folks, there you have it. That's a 360-degree view of marijuana use, from its effects on individual health to its ripples across our economy and society. Covered a lot of ground today, from medical applications and fitness considerations to addiction concerns and economic impacts. We hope this episode has helped clear the air on some of the complexities surrounding cannabis use. Remember, at Wellness Musketeers, we believe that informed decisions lead to better health outcomes. If you've found value in today's discussion, we'd be thrilled if you'd subscribe to our podcast and share this episode with others who might benefit from this information. Your support helps us continue to bring you comprehensive, unbiased content on important health and wellness topics. Got any thoughts on today's episode or ideas for future discussions? We'd love to hear from you. Reach out to us at davidmliss@gmail.com. So until next time, this is Aussie Mike James and the Wellness Musketeers, reminding you to stay informed, stay well, and always consider the bigger picture when it comes to your health and wellness journey.